What's up, Chuck? Good to see you again.
Seeing you.
How strange has this off season been? I mean, not only with just COVID and quarantine, getting the kids back, but not knowing now, presumably 3 weeks before you guys start, what the schedule is going to look like.
Yeah, it's a challenge, not just for us, but for everyone around the country, and not just in our profession. You guys are going through it as well. Your personal lives, you just kind of wake up every day, and you attack each day for what it is, and then wake up the next day and handle all those challenges that come along with collegiate athletics and basketball at this level.
Colin?
Yeah, Chuck, I guess how have you seen the team respond to kind of the adversity that's been kind of thrown out in the last 6 months, and how have they kind of looked at the first couple of weeks of, I guess, full team practice?
I've been pleasantly surprised. I've got 3 kids of my own, and I know how challenging it is for adults, let alone for kids, to create a bubble, maintain a bubble, take care of their academic responsibilities. It's been a challenge for our guys, but I think they've responded really, really well. They've been committed to trying to, create a bubble when we got together a few months ago, sustaining the bubble, and then having a positive outlook, and not worrying about the things that we can't control, but really focusing in on the things that we can.
Michael?
Hey, Chuck. Michael Lanana with the State newspaper. It's good to meet you virtually.
Same here, Mike.
Yeah, talking about how weird the pandemic is. But I'm just curious. I'm looking forward to covering this team this year. For a casual college basketball fan, what's maybe something about this team that maybe you think is maybe underappreciated, or maybe something that goes under the radar about this group that maybe might surprise people this year?
You know what? I think one of the things that might be overlooked is how deep we are. Like, we've got some real depth at every position, and teams usually who are pretty good and make a run in league play and make runs in the NCAA tournament. Usually those teams are deep at all the positions, and that's the one thing that stands out for me. God forbid there's an injury, there's foul trouble. Obviously, the pandemic has thrown another challenge our way. At least I feel like we've got enough bodies to sustain some of the challenges that all coaches around the country encounter, and the coaches and the staffs and the teams that can figure out those challenges are the ones that have success. And I think a big part of that is depth. So I'm not sure if the casual fan really knows how deep we are. I think we've got a good group of kids who are working really, really hard, who are super committed, are talented, and we got bodies. We've got a handful of guys that can really play.
Thank you.
What has surprised you, if anything, about Javon Benson so far early on during practices?
It's a great question. I think a lot of times, whether it's here or nationally, freshmen struggle when things aren't going their way. It lingers 1 or 2 days, and that's just part of the maturation process. It's part of the maturity, understanding what it takes to play at this level. Javon, like most freshmen, struggles at times, but he comes back the next day with a great attitude, focused, locked in, and he usually bounces back right away. And that's hard to do. So I've been really impressed by his attitude and his approach to learning.
John Del Bianco?
Chuck, you obviously know how important Mike Kotsar was to this team last year, and with him gone, what do you think of the makeup of that front court, the blueprint, the pieces that you have there?
In the past, we were able to do it with 1 or 2 guys, with Chris Silver, with Mike Kotsar. This year we may have to do it by committee, especially early on. But again, it holds true to my answer 2 seconds ago about depth. You've got Alonzo Frink, you got Wildens, you got Jalen, you got Javon Benson. You've got size and depth. So now hopefully you can do it collectively, as opposed to just relying on Mike or Chris Silver, because that was really the case 2 years ago. I think most teams that played us try to attack Chris Silver, try to get him in foul trouble. And their thought process was, if Chris is out the game, we got a chance to win the game. I think last year there was a lot of that. If we can get Mike Kotsar in trouble, where this year it's a little bit different. We don't have the experience that we've had in the past, but we do have depth in that position.
And if I could follow up to that, what have you seen in the development of Alonzo, and what steps do you think he needs to take going into his junior year to make you guys a formidable front court?
Yeah, you know what? He's gotten himself in shape, and Scott, our strength coach, has done a tremendous job with him. And I think he's starting to reap some of the rewards of all that hard work. Zoe's got really good hands, really good footwork, and he's got a really good understanding for the game. His challenges in the past have been being in shape so he can sustain 2 or 3 good possessions. You know, Zoe in the past has shown flashes, and then he would just get fatigued, or, you know, youth and inexperience would take over. But as a junior, again, I give him credit. He's worked really hard to get himself in the best shape of his life. And I think now you're starting to see his talent, you know, his hands, his feet, his decision-making. So I'm excited for him. I'm excited that we have him.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Dave?
Statistically, Chuck, AJ, you know, had basically the same kind of year he had last year as he did as a freshman. Yet, you know, maybe some of the percentages weren't as great. How did you see him be able to handle that? And how have you seen him approach on how to fix that going into this year?
It's a great question. You know, the first thing I would say is that I try to remind people when we're talking about AJ that he did reclassify up. So his freshman year was really his senior year in high school, and his sophomore year should have been his freshman year. So the fact that he's been able to average 13.5 points in the SEC, and we finished both of his freshman and sophomore year in the top half of the league really is amazing. Now, you know, I think Chris Silver helped his freshman year because the attention was in a low post, so he got open looks. I think it took him some time last year to figure out his game, because we didn't really have a low post dominant player. Mike really played off the elbows and pick and pops. So it took him some time, but if you guys followed us, you can see AJ really improved by January and February and got better. I think at this point now, you know, he's physically starting to develop. He has a really good understanding of what we want to do here at South Carolina. He understands how we want to play on both ends of the floor. And this is what it should look like, right? I think in today's day and age of such a microwave society, one and done, two and done, you know, we have a tendency to forget some kids. It takes a little bit longer. And he's going to be a heck of a player today. He is. His junior year, he's playing really, really well. But that's what it should look like.
Colin?
Yeah, Chuck, I guess Keyshawn Bryant had a pretty quietly strong end of the year last year. I think he averaged 15 and 9 and shot really well. Just what kind of jump have you seen from Keyshawn from where he ended last year to where he is now? And how do you feel like he can really impact what you guys want to do this year?
He seems a little bit more comfortable in his own skin on the offensive side of the ball. Like, he's slowed down a little bit. The game is coming to him a little bit easier. He's really, really worked hard on making open shots, which then if he can make 1 or 2 open shots and the defense has to come out and play him, you guys who have been around the program understand the type of athlete that he is. A lot like AJ, he was thrown to the fire early on in his career. And but I think now, 2 years later, he's really benefiting from all that experience, because you can tell his confidence on both ends of the floor, but for sure on the offensive end, he's playing with better pace. He's more decisive in what he wants to do. And when he's making perimeter shots like he has been, he becomes a really, really exciting player.
Michael?
What kind of impact has Seventh had, just as far as, you know, someone who has experience of playing in a championship game, and then someone too, obviously, who's had to wait so long just to get out there, battle through the rhabdomyolysis, you know, this summer? Just what kind of impact has he had on some of his younger, less experienced teammates and just on the locker room?
You know, you touched on it. I think people have a short memory, like, A, he was a tremendous player coming out of high school. And B, you just mentioned it. You can't put a price tag on winning. Like, he was on a team that won a national championship. he's battling every day in practice against some of the elite guards and players in the country. And his experience at that level helps us in regards to, sometimes you don't know what to do, but you certainly know what not to do. And so that's where Seventh comes in. He's like, I've been around long enough to know, pick my spots, how to read the offense, how to read the defense. And he's good, and he's like a really good player. Like people have this opinion of him because things didn't work out at UNC that he's just okay. He's in my opinion, he's better than just okay. He's got a change of gears in the open court. He's starting to make open shots. He's still got to continue to evolve that part of his game. But, more than ever before, he seems real confident making open shots. He understands pressure. He understands playing at the highest level. I think he's been tremendous. I really do. I think he's been awesome, and I'm excited for him because I think he wants to prove that he's a good player, which he is.
Is the way he's playing right now, and maybe even more importantly, the way he's carrying himself, his confidence, is that reminiscent of what you saw maybe from him in high school, when he was at his peak and he was, making all those headlines?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the year off last year was great for him because there was no pressure on him. He can quietly come in the gym, work on his game, develop his game. He can watch and see how we do it here as opposed to how they did it at UNC in regards to how we run our practices, how we do our scouting reports, how we watch film. So I think the year off really, really helped him. And then he really, really worked his tail off. I'm not sure what the average fan or casual fan thinks of him, but it's not like he came here and just like hung out. Like he was in the gym working on his game. He was driven and committed. And you're starting to see that in practice. So, I'm excited for him. I think he's going to be tremendous.
John?
Yeah, going back to AJ for a minute. I know you've got a little bit of a unique perspective having recruited him and being so tight with the family for so long. What were your conversations like with him when he was going through the process this year? Were you surprised at all at the decision he made? And, from your perspective, what do you feel like were kind of keys for him in coming back?
Well, anytime you have a young man like AJ where the possibility of playing in the NBA exists, you've got to let him dream. You've got to let him experiment and figure out like, man, do I want to do this? So, I thought Frank was great. Frank said, hey, if this is something that you want to do, obviously, let's see where you're at. It's been a different year because of the pandemic. So there were no workouts. There's no face-to-face meetings. Everything was done via Zoom. So I think the family as well as AJ kind of understood, hey, let me go through this process a little bit. Let me try to learn as much as I can. Let me try to feel comfortable in this setting, understanding that, this is probably not the best time to put your name in the draft because you can't improve your stock with the workouts because there were no workouts.
Colin?
Yeah, Chuck, I guess now that what would have been the live period's over and, you guys there's some guys in the 2021 class you obviously can't publicly talk about. Just how do you feel like this recruitment process went over the summer and this quarantine, and where do you guys feel like you guys are right now with this 21 and 22 classes?
I thought, it's a great question. I think, Frank, starting with Frank, and then obviously it trickles down to the rest of the staff. He does a tremendous job of evaluating the talent that fits our program. So we worked really, really hard to identify those guys early on. So when the pandemic happened, we were pretty confident in who we wanted. And so we, in a weird way, maybe the pandemic helped us a little bit because, we knew who we wanted. We evaluated well throughout the year. We worked our tails off to establish relationships. And I think if there were a spring or summer, some of those kids' stocks would have risen even more because other programs would have gotten a chance to watch them play. So I think Frank did a great job of just identify who we like, who we want, who fits. And so there was no hesitation moving forward once the pandemic hit. And kind of the same thing with the 2022 class. We've really worked hard all year to try to identify those kids nationally as well as locally. And so I feel like we've gotten a jump on those kids, and we got to keep working every day and continue to beat the bushes and all those things. But I think we're in a good spot.
And we'll go last question to John Del Bianco.
Chuck, what has Will Bailey brought to the program? What's it been like working with him the last few months? What have you really learned about him as a coach, as a recruiter, as a person?
Hey, the last one you hit, hits the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head. Like, great person, right? Like just a great individual, someone that you would, welcome into your home and trust with your family. So he's been awesome. It's been an effortless transition, I think. He's he's a relentless worker. He's in here early, in here late. He's done a tremendous job in a short period of time of establishing relationships with our staff, which, it's sometimes could be challenging, but it's been effortless with Will. There's chemistry among, us with him. And then he's done a really good job establishing relationships with our players, which is really, really critical. So, there's no surprise that he's been successful every place he's been at. Every program that he's been at, they've had some success. And now that I've spent time with him, I see why they went to the Sweet 16 at LaSalle. I see why St. Louis is, nationally ranked top 30 program this year. And he's impacted both of those programs in a real positive way.